Hi, my name is Katie Schiffelbein, and here's my PowerPoint for my introduction. So a little bit about myself. I am the 7th and 8th grade science teacher at Rupenthal Middle School in Russell, Kansas. I am also the Science Olympiad coach, and I also coach junior high cheerleading. A little bit else about myself is I am married, and my husband and I have a beautiful little boy who is 1.5 years old, and we also have a fur baby named Maggie. So, whenever we talk about challenges that we probably all have seen in the last year with pandemic teaching, is that different types of challenges come on different days. Some of the things that I know we've probably all had experience with is schedule changes, remote or hybrid learning, mask challenges, and actually getting students to keep their masks on correctly, and just your generalized political views. But one thing that I will say that I strive for is trying to not put the focus necessarily on me, but keeping my focus on my students and how that's helping them in dealing with those challenges, and actually being able to solve problems is something that I myself pride myself on, and I think it's really what helps push me through this difficult time, is being able to know that these are issues that are easily addressable. Whenever we look at mindsets, we look at the top 3, and those are: all students can learn and grow, social capital and teamwork will prevail, and happiness is a choice. When I first started reading about this, I definitely agreed with 1 and 2, but before I really dove in deep, I didn't quite understand what they meant by number 3, because in our building, we definitely teach social emotional skills. It's something that we've really been hitting hard over the past 2 years with our students. And that's almost the complete opposite of what we taught them until I actually started reading the literature, where the literature basically says is you can't focus on what you have no control over, and you can control your own attitude, which then definitely will make you seem happier. And so overall, I definitely would say that I agree with all 3 of these mindsets, and I try to implement them as much as possible into my classroom teaching. Definitely number 1, that no lost kid is something that I don't think that there's ever a lost cause. It's something that I definitely strive for in my room. Is I know I teach a hard subject, and a lot of kids don't like science. I get it a lot. They're like, Mrs. Schiffelbein, it is so hard. Your class is so hard. I hate science. And by the end of the year, they have changed their whole tune. I was so shocked at how many kids at the end of the year came up and gave me hugs and said, thank you so much. You made science fun for us. And that is what this whole gig is about, in my opinion. When we talk about dispositions, we look at the 5 dispositions of confidence, decisiveness, sense of humor, empathy, and assertive learners. And I would definitely agree that a good building leader needs all 5 of these. Being able to view things from other people's perspective, being able to balance their own ego, being afraid to admit that they maybe weren't correct, and not being afraid to just lay down the law and say, this is what we're doing. I think all of those are important. I came from a business background before I started teaching. I used to run a sporting goods store, and before that I worked for a telecommunications company in their marketing department. And being in that leadership position, I definitely think that you have to be willing to admit that you're wrong and also be willing to look at the other side of it and being able to say, okay, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. Let's see how we can work together to make this work out. I think all 5 of these are things that you need in order to be a strong leader. As for practices, we have our focus and our prioritizing, examining feedback and data, and our emotional intelligence. I think not only as a building leader you need to be able to do all of these, but I also think that you need to be able to do this just in a classroom as a classroom teacher, because you really are the leader in the room at that point in time, and being able to be a good leader and being able to focus and prioritize and not necessarily turn kids away, but being able to say, no, this is what we're doing. Examine all of the data from your room, and also being able to perceive like the energy of the room is something that we probably all do, but it's definitely something that our building leaders do, and I don't think they get enough credit for it. Now we get into our 8 principles of leadership. I had split these up into 2 slides. We have our personal courage, public interest ahead of self, self-control, employee-centeredness. And I'll talk about these 4 first. When we think about these as a typical building leader, we probably always think of that public interest ahead of self. The we is greater than the me, because they're speaking on behalf of the entire building that they're leading. And so putting the group's interests ahead of their own personal interest is something that we always prioritize in a building leader. But also, on kind of the same as that, making sure that we're just demonstrating our personal courage and never being afraid to do what's right, even if that means that it's the hard choice. Sometimes those are the hardest ones to do, is that it's right, but we know people aren't going to like it. And then, as always, I know from my personal experience, being employee-centered definitely just makes for a much happier work environment, and really thinking about your team that's underneath you and how you as a leader can go and do things for your team to make their days just a little bit easier is something that I always strived for whenever I worked in the business industry. Going on to the other 4, recognizing talent, requiring high ethics, sensitivity and understanding, and inclusiveness. This is something I think my personal building leader has done exceptionally well, and I've talked to him several times. I'm kind of sad he's actually retiring this year, because I feel like I've learned so much in the last 2 years from him on these aspects, and being able to recognize talent and helping people fit into their roles and hold people accountable from the bottom up, and making sure that we're all performing at equal standard, but also being able to show empathy and know what it is, and putting yourself in that person's shoes even when they're going through a tough situation, and making sure that nobody ever feels left out or alone, and making sure that everybody does have that good support system. That's something that I think, as I said, my current principal has done really well, and that, like, a couple examples of this is during our mentor program. We do a 2-year mentorship while we're in the transition to teach program, And he every week would do lunch with the principal once a week and just take notes and talk to all of his new staff and figure out what we needed and what he could do to help us. And that's one place where I learned that that's what a good leader is, the taking the notes, the recognizing talent, getting to know your staff, and making sure that they're supported in a way that they need to be supported. All right, so now time to reflect. This is technically my slides 9, 10, and 11. I put it all on one slide. I think it's definitely easy to see building leaders as a separate form from the rest of the building, but in reality, neither of us could do our jobs without the other, and so it really is working as a team and not pulling ranks and recognizing that we all bring something valuable to the table. Sitting on those important building ship leader committees and knowing that, heck, all the way from the top to the bottom, we all serve a role, and without one another, it would be very difficult. And all of us working together is how we truly get that successful learning environment for our students. And honestly, that should always be the goal, is providing a healthy and happy environment for those kids. So then relating back this project to standards, so whenever I think of correlation, I work very hard to include different learning standards, not only in my schoolwork for my Fort Hays classes, but also into the curriculum for my own students. I think it's important for them to be able to basically do what I'm doing right now, to have a task, being able to see the end goal on their mastery, and being able to say by the end of the lesson, yes, I learned that. And I think relevancy plays a big key into this. So I definitely think this assignment was relevant, learning the different principles of leadership combined with the practices of a successful leader has provided me personally with a roadmap. I would love to be a building leader in my school district someday. I actually had the opportunity to sit on a couple committees last year and have sat on a couple committees this year. I have asked to be on our building leadership committee and think that this class is going to definitely help me in that goal. But before I can even do that, I know I can take this stuff and implement it into my classroom. And to reflect on all of this, I think as a future leader, I definitely see myself working hard to be the type of leader I would want to work for. I learned this way back whenever I worked in business, that there are some people that just aren't great, and me being able to self-reflect on me and have goals and things that I feel are important definitely provides some checks for that. And I'm not just sitting there trying to staff a building or fill in the gaps whenever they arrive. It's really trying to build that team mentality and culture and community more than anything. And just so you can see, I do have my references here on my last slide. All right. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed.